Hello, and welcome to the DCB Variety Hour. Did you know that one of our favorite things to do at DCB Studios is to make large things small, and small things large? Well, it is, and today we're going to do just that. You know these two little guys, right? Of course! They're the iconic Bully Boy and Lucky Dog from the Fisher-Price Play Family sets of the 1960s through the 1980s. They are just over 2 inches tall, but we wanted them larger. So we made them 8 times bigger, and now they're a whopping 17 inches tall. How the heck did we do that, you may ask? Well, let us show you. The first thing we need to do is figure out which character we want to make next. Let's just scan through our toy collection here to see what we find. Ah, here's the perfect candidate. This is a rare 1970s Fisher-Price Play Family Sesame Street Characters pack. And within this pack is our favorite Muppet, the lovable Bert. Here are some fun facts about Bert. He debuted, along with his buddy Ernie, on the very first episode of Sesame Street in 1969. He was originally voiced and puppeted by Jim Henson, while Frank Oz did Ernie. They quickly realized after the first performance that they should swap the roles. It is often said that the names Bert and Ernie were an homage to the characters in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, but the Henson Company says this is purely coincidental. The Bert Play Family figure was available in both Sesame Street Fisher-Price play sets, as well as this character pack. To get started, we're going to need the Bert figure, obviously, a digital micrometer for measuring, and some dessert sprinkles. Colorful ones are the best. Let's open up our favorite 3D design program. We prefer Autodesk Fusion 360. As you can see, we have already drawn up a bunch of Fisher-Price Play Family character elements. Since Bert uses a standard body, we'll simply place that file into our design. The rest of them, though, is uniquely exclusive to him, so we must now measure and draw these parts. Let's start with the collar and work our way up. His head is a very unique shape, but we can figure it out by getting the diameter of the bottom, the top, and the overall height. We will put in a 3-point arc between the top and bottom points and pull the curve to the desired shape. We only need to draw half of the head and then simply revolve it around the center axis. It's always a good idea to color the elements to make sure each piece is its own part. Besides, it just looks nicer on the screen. For the ears, we decided to bring in a photo of the toy to help guide us with the shape. We'll just size it up and place it. Now it is just a matter of tracing around the ear with a 3-point arc. Once we have the ear complete, we just simply mirror it to the other side of his head. For his face, we find it's easier just to doodle it in Illustrator. Import the photo onto your canvas and click away. Once we are satisfied that we have the shape down, we will delete the photo and then export the graphic as an SVG file. Now we go back into Fusion, select the midplane, and insert the SVG file. It's helpful to have the photo of the original still so that we can size up the face correctly. Now we select each shape and pull them far beyond Bert's head. Going into patch mode, we will make an offset shape from his head and use this to slice the face elements. It's a bit tricky to explain, and I don't think we can, but we will put a link in the description for the guy who taught us everything we know about Fusion. Bert's hair is very organic in shape. Our fusion skills are not good enough to create this on the computer. So instead, we opted to at least try and make a shape at the size needed that we can use later as an armature for clay. We will start by exporting his head into our slicing program and enlarging it by 800%. The head was a massive 33-hour print, so we sped it up a bit for you. The ears didn't take nearly as long, but we still sped up that footage too. A little test fitting before we go on to the next step. The thing about 3D printing that a lot of people don't know, especially with FDM printers, is that there's a lot of cleanup work to do to get rid of the print lines. Our preferred method is to use filler primer paint on all our parts. This is a thick primer that fills in a lot of the imperfections. We will give each piece a liberal coating of the paint. As much as the primer starts to get you to a smooth piece, you're still going to want to manually fill in those lines. For that, we like to use glazing putty from Bondo. You can buy this at your local automotive or big box hardware store, or on Amazon. Squeeze a blob onto a plastic spatula and start spreading it around like cake frosting. As you pull the spatula, you can easily see what areas are recessed and need attention. The head has a pretty hefty print line about 1/3 up from the bottom and needs to be sanded down. We're using a 60 grit sandpaper to smooth it out as much as possible. Now on to the putty. After the putty dries, in about 20 minutes, we can sand it smooth. It can go quicker and be less dusty if you wet sand it, which means dipping your sandpaper in water periodically. Make sure your sandpaper is rated for wet sanding. We'll do another layer of filler primer. Oftentimes, we end up repeating this process of primer, putty, a few times over until everything is baby butt smooth. Now let's tackle the hair sculpting. For that, we are using Epoxy Sculpt. This is a 2-part clay-like putty that dries rock hard without needing to bake it. Simply pull out 2 even chunks of part A and part B and knead them until they are evenly blended together. It is very sticky to begin with, so it's a good idea to let it rest for a few minutes. Also, you will definitely want to wear gloves for this. You will have about 30 minutes or so before it becomes too stiff to work with. So plan ahead and do small enough sections that you feel you can finish up. I think we got the shape pretty good here. We're going to wait for this to cure fully and then use our Dremel tool to etch in the lines. Somewhere in the deep dark crevices of space and time, there is the footage we took of the mold making process. But we can't find the files anywhere. Someday we will do a video on how we do make molds, but for now, you'll just have to see the finished ones already done. This is the bottom section of the body. We already had this mold from when we made the Jumbo Boy and Dog. It's held up quite nicely. The ball was used as a key when we were making the mold, but forgot to remove it when pouring the second half, so now we have to put it in each time. Oops. Here is the mold for the top half of the body. We remembered to move the bit we used for a key this time. For the collar mold, we 3D printed a custom outer shell and used pegboard for the top and bottom. It's held together with wing nuts. It may seem excessive, but the part had to stay nice and round, and we didn't want to waste too much money on expensive silicone. We painted one side with spray paint so it was easy to quickly see which way to position everything when putting it together. For the head mold, we did a multi-layered brush-on mold with the same silicone. It's very time-consuming, but saves you so much money. The last layer was decked with specially designed silicone plugs that snap into holes of the fiberglass mother mold that we did. Always make sure to put in registration keys in your mold. It's quite a process, but the results are a lighter weight, less expensive, and more durable mold. The hair mold is your basic one-part dump mold. We sliced up the sides to remove the piece. We're not big fans of this type of mold, but it seems suitable in this situation. We did add a couple of rods around the base of the original before we molded it, so that there would be channels in the mold that serve as vents and let trapped air bubbles escape. Always use a good mold release to prolong the life of your molds. Using our trusty Roto Casting machine that we built, we'll start by casting up the top section of the body. The advantage of Roto Casting is that since the piece is hollow, you use about a third of the resin that you would for a solid piece. Not only is the piece lighter and costs less, there's also less chance of air bubbles forming. After about 20 minutes of rotating, the resin should be cured. Let's open up our mold and see what we got. Seems to look pretty good. Since the mold sides are rigid and the part can be hard to remove, we use compressed air around the edge to help raise the piece out. Looking good. Let's move on to the collar piece. Again, we fill the mold about a third of the way. Screw on the lid and let her rip. We ding the side a bit with a screwdriver, but that's easily fixable with putty. As always, make sure to thoroughly scrub your resin pieces with a mild dish soap bath to remove the mold release so your paint sticks better to it. As we were looking through our tub of parts, we noticed something odd about the collar pieces. They all seemed to be puffy and distorted. Was there something wrong with the mold that we didn't notice? We quickly cast up another collar, but it seemed to be perfectly fine right out of the mold. So we got to thinking, maybe we removed them from the mold too soon, and as it heated up, it built up pressure, and with no place to go, it pushed out the walls. To remedy this, we decided to drill a hole into the casting once we removed it from the mold. That little vent seemed to do the trick of letting off pressure. The collars now stay perfectly flat. Now we have the arduous task of sanding all the mold line seams. This step can be tedious. Sometimes it's easiest just to get out the Dremel and grind it down, then fill in the grooves with putty later. To attach the body halves together, we're going to use a two-part epoxy. We put in these 3 pegs and holes in our design for ease of proper alignment. To plug up the gap between the 2 halves and fill in the larger imperfections, we're using an automotive-grade Bondo. Put a glob of it onto a scrap piece and then squeeze out a little bit of catalyst. Keep in mind that the more catalyst you put in, the quicker it sets up. The company also sells little plastic spatulas that are specifically tinted the color that you'll want your Bondo to be, so it's an easy way to tell if you're mixing the proportions right. Once the Bondo is cured, you can try and sand it with 40 to 60 grit sandpaper, but you may find that a file or rasp works better. Even more preferable to that is to use a high-speed orbital sander. That'll certainly make quick work of it. Either way, be sure to wear a mask. This stuff can be nasty. We have to drill holes into Bert's head now to let out the demons. The top and bottom require a large 2-inch hole saw. The ears are just a standard drill bit. Afterwards, you are left with some shavings that may look a lot like coconut, but please be aware that they do not taste like coconut. It's time to clean up the ears and get them ready for attaching to the head. Again, we are using a 2-part epoxy. We like using this high-grade 2-part automotive primer on the bodies. The instructions say that for a medium build, which we want, we'll need to do 4 parts primer to 2 parts activator and 2 parts reducer. We'll pour the primer through a strainer to make sure there are no clumps and it's thin enough to work in our paint gun. 80 milliliters should be enough to start with, and that makes the math easy. So now we just add 20 milliliters of activator and 20 milliliters of reducer. Mix well. It doesn't hurt to run it through a strainer again. Because this is a 2-part system, it actually hardens as it cures, creating a strong bonded coating, like magic shell. A good rule of thumb is that anytime anything comes in 2 parts, you know it'll be a better quality, be it glue, paint, or resin. Since the collars are fairly small, and very little of the surface is exposed, we didn't feel like mixing up more of our fancy primer for them. We just used our standard Rust-Oleum primer. The primer is a dull matte gray, which makes it easy to see scratches and imperfections on the surface. Once again, we use the glazing putty to fix this. We can use our Rust-Oleum primer to cover this up later. We were able to use the leftover yellow automotive paint from the boy body we did previously. The brand we use is Omni, which is manufactured by PPG. It goes on very smoothly and dries quickly, so multiple layers can be added without worry of paint run or wrinkling. We usually only need 2 layers, but often do a 3rd just to be safe. Oh, and it smells bad. That's another sign that something is of professional quality. The hair was just painted with a Rust-Oleum 2X flat black. Flat paints are so much easier to work with. For the collars, Rust-Oleum 2X in a flat white. We ordered a custom tinted green auto paint for his body. Hopefully we'll find some use for the rest of this paint in the future, as it's over $80 a quart. Now for the fun part, and when it all starts to come together. Since we're only making 6 of these, we're going to hand paint on his facial features. We'll start with the whites of his eyes, using Rust-Oleum enamel. Followed by Rust-Oleum red enamel. Then finally, Rust-Oleum flat black enamel. This is just like that scene in that one movie. You know the one I'm talking about, right? Now that all the parts are painted, we have to protect the paint job with a couple layers of automotive clear coat. This stuff smells even worse than the paint and is extremely sticky. We have to work fast yet carefully, but the results are well worth it. The original toy was held together by using the hairpiece as a pin that goes through the head, collar, and half the body. They then melted the other end of the pin to lock everything together. We're going to use a piece of PVC pipe. First, we'll glue on a custom branded disc we made with PL Premium Glue. Then we'll insert the pipe and disc into the body. We'll slide on the collar disc and the head. And then top it off with some more glue on the hairpiece and into the pipe. He fits in quite nicely with his two buddies, Lucky and Billy. And here are a couple more. We made a very limited run of only 6, and we'll probably not make any more, as we tend to quickly move on to new projects and rarely revisit the past ones. So if you'd like one, go to our website, times8.biz. A direct link will be in the description below. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. And why not tell a friend? Be good and stay squeaky.